And now to the front pages, bubbling and boiling with one story only. There's the front page of the Mail on Sunday. Bust up Boris, hit by shock poll blow, which is basically that people are not impressed by the latest story and are gathering around Jeremy Hunt as a potential Prime Minister, they say. The Sunday Express is as disobliging to Boris Johnson as that one was. Why won't Boris tell us what happened? That's relating, of course, to the hustings yesterday, where he dodged the questions about the Carrie Simons row. But Carrie Simons, in a more friendly way, has been speaking, or friends of hers have been speaking to The Sun and given her verdict. It's all a stitch-up by left-wing neighbours, and that is also the view taken by the Sunday Telegraph. Left-wing neighbours admit taping Boris row, and people are asking, what kind of country is it where you can't have a row without your neighbours taping it and calling the police? And there's the Sunday Times. Boris is a security risk. This is allegedly two cabinet ministers gossiping, saying that he will be blackmailed and there'll be further leaks to come out. And they've got a whole series of stories which we'll talk about inside that paper. Very, very interesting. And then finally, the Sunday Mirror. Boris row was so frightening, I had to call police, says the neighbour involved. So where are we going to start? We're going to start with that story. That is the only place to start.
Yeah, it's everything today is about kind of Boris backlash, and obviously we saw the story emerge in The Guardian on Friday night, and it was all about the row that Boris Johnson had with his girlfriend Carrie Simons, and the neighbours there had called the police and made a recording in their hallway, and then passed that to The Guardian. And now what we've seen over the weekend, and particularly all over the papers today, is the scrutiny has turned from Boris and his girlfriend to the neighbours that made the recording.
So it's gone from the story to the story about the story. And of course this is technology. Because of these mobile phones, anything can be recorded or filmed at any time.
Yeah, and so the newspapers are looking at who are these people, and I think trying to look more into what their motivation is. And the suggestion in some of the papers this morning is that their motivation might be political. That's certainly what's being hinted at in the Sunday Times. This is the way that they describe the neighbours. Their names are Tom Penn and Eve Lee. They are left-wing dramatists. There's some great descriptions of them in here. Lee is an enthusiastic Buddhist. In terms of like her playwriting career, she's getting some.
It all sounds exactly as if it was written by Jennifer Sanders out of Ab Fab. I mean,
yeah, it's quite
it's great social
silly.
Comedy in a way.
Yeah, and apparently she gave Boris Johnson the finger in the street. So the implication behind all of this is that there's an ulterior motive here.
Ash.
I mean, I think that this coverage of the political views of the neighbours is actually weirdly McCarthyite. This idea that because they voted Labour, because they were pro-EU, because she gave the finger to Boris Johnson in the street, the way like 50% of Londoners, I think, would, that they shouldn't be trusted, and that their motivations for recording the row, the screaming, the smashing were malign, and that, you know, James Cleverly saying that the big element of the story is that they called the police at all. And the reason why I feel so strongly about this is because I think that this has got negative consequences beyond the Westminster pony show.
For other women who are perhaps shouting in a room and hoping that somebody's going to
Absolutely, because having a row in which you shout and you say things you don't mean, that's a normal part of relationships. Screaming, get off me at midnight, hearing thuds, hearing smashing, those things aren't normal. Physical intimidation is not a normal part of relationships.
Yeah, we don't know that's what he was doing.
Well, no, but from the recording we don't know whether that was Boris or not, but saying that that form of conflict and physical intimidation, no matter what side it's on, is not a normal part of relationships. And to see MPs and right-wing pundits just fall over themselves to normalise it, I think is incredibly irresponsible.
I'm not sure it is normalisation. I think there's a bit of context put into how the recordings were made. There's a suggestion here from the guy Tom saying that his sole concern was the welfare and safety of my neighbours, and yet at the same time we have friends of Carrie's here speaking to The Sun saying at no point did she fear for her safety. They had a row. Lots of couples have them. They questioned some of the behaviour of the neighbours, including posters being put up, anti-Boris, hate mail that they've received, the so-called two-fingered salute, which I believe the female protagonist in this, she tried to delete that from her Twitter feed. You know, I suppose there could be an argument that if anyone else had been affected by this, and if there'd been a recording of perhaps somebody on the left, you would have the likes of Hacked Off's Steve Coogan and Hugh Grant saying, hang on, isn't this a gross invasion of privacy?
I can tell we're not going to agree on this. I'd like to move on, however, to the bigger question, the sense of, does this matter? Is it going to change people's minds? Is it going to derail or change or alter the leadership contest in any way at all? And there's a poll in the Mail on Sunday, I think, which suggests the answer may be yes.
So the first poll in the Mail on Sunday suggests when it comes to all voters, and they've really got up to the minute polling here. So on Thursday, 36% of all voters were in favour of Boris Johnson over Jeremy Hunt, and then by Saturday that had fallen from 36% to 29%, with Jeremy Hunt overtaking Boris and on 32%. If you ask Tory voters, there's less of an impact. So on Thursday, 55% were behind Boris. On Saturday, 45% were behind him. So a little bit of a drop-off, which would be reflected in the hustings of some boos for questions. What's interesting is the effect on actual Tory councillors. It's all very well talking about what the country thinks, but obviously the only people that have a vote are Tory members when it comes to deciding the next Prime Minister. And according to this poll, Comres in the Sunday Telegraph, Boris Johnson is 22 points ahead with the grassroots.
He felt before this that he was unstoppable, because it was not just that he had a big lead, but that people were saying they weren't going to change their mind either. And that is probably still the overall sense of the papers today.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing, though, about the Mail on Sunday poll is the thing that came up in my mind was that during this leadership campaign, there have been a lot of MPs, a lot of Tory MPs that you wouldn't have expected to support Boris Johnson. I think the phrase around Westminster has been that there are people holding their nose and supporting Boris Johnson, and that is because they believe that he can deliver them a general election.